Thank you. This evening, this is part 2 of the grievance hearing that we held a couple of weeks ago. Before I start, I'm not going to go through all the rules that I had, but basically the same rules apply that were in place from last time. However, I do have one thing that I want to say, and it has to do with bad language. Apparently last time there was a concern about somebody that slipped with regard to some language. I would ask everyone here in attendance to please watch your language, okay? Please be mindful of that. Everyone knows, both from the police commission point of view, that that's not one of the things that I tolerate. So if anyone is going to do that, I guess I'll tell you right from the get-go, I'm going to ask you to leave. Okay. We're going to call this hearing to order, and the time, I believe, is 5:35, excuse me. Okay. Why don't we rise and have a Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Just as a note, I do have a copy of the proof of posting for this evening. Dawn, okay? Thank you. And this evening we're here for the grievance hearing for grievance 0906 and grievance 0907. And I think where we left off last time was that we were at grievance 09. And I think we're at a point that not going for final arguments, but if anybody had anything to add with regard to that grievance, would you please state it? And you have the floor.
I'm all set. I'm ready for final arguments.
Okay.
We're all set also.
Okay.
Well, we have some questions.
Right.
Do you want to start or you want me to start?
No, why don't you start?
What I'd like to do is just,
Start.
okay, for clarification purposes, I want to go back to the first charge back in, for an incident that happened in December of '08. Okay. What I'd like to do is get a little time frame here, if we could. In '08, December 23rd, I believe, he was suspended. Is that right, Chief?
You're looking at, I believe you're looking at grievance 0907.
It would be, yeah, that would be the 0907 where he was suspended for 5 days, I believe it was.
No, the 0907 that I have in front of me is the last hearing was on 0906 and 0907. Neither of those had suspension components to them.
He wasn't suspended on December 23rd of '09.
That one I don't have with me. The only two I have with me are what I had last meeting, which was one of the items was from December 19th, 2008, which was the date of the event, which was a remedial training and written reprimand. And then the other one that we discussed, 0906, The date of event was July 3rd, 2009. That was a verbal reprimand. That originally had been recommended as a 2-day suspension by Lieutenant Klein, and then after talking with Officer Defina, he changed it to a verbal reprimand.
All right.
So neither of the two that we presented had actual suspensions that came out of them.
Yeah, please.
I guess what we're trying to get at here, and if I might, Chief, the December 23rd, 08, had to do with the December 11th incident, okay? And we're trying to decipher here whether or not the December 11th, whether or not this 07 that you're bringing forward is indeed the same one, or you're have different charges with regard to the 07, because on the December 23rd, when he got the 5-day suspension, okay, that had to do with the December 11th, 2008 incident. But then you come to the same incident, December 11th, 2008. However, it goes until that following July, and that one refers to the 12/11/2008. And I want to get some clarification, or we need some clarification, if indeed that is the same incident, however, there are different charges applied to it. And that's where I don't quite understand. If someone could help me with that, and then we could probably, dispense with that if my assumption is incorrect.
If I could approach, I have the write-up you're referring to, if you'd like to see it.
Okay.
I believe Officer Defina did mention the write-up that you're talking about. I don't have that with me. I believe, and I won't put words in his mouth, I believe Captain Bagel talked about the fact that the incident may have been the same, but that the charges that came out of the incident, that there was an additional set of charges that came out of it.
That's correct. So we're talking about both the same incident both times. One was for incomplete and the other one was for untruthfulness.
I don't have the other one. I can just tell you that I believe that's what the captain said last time.
But they're both referring to the December 11th, 2008. Is that correct? Okay. Just so that we're clear. I just wanted to get that clear in my mind. Yep. So it is indeed.
So it's the same incident. Captain, you want to give us a brief on that? Same incident, different charge?
It is the same incident. When,
Let me ask you this. I'll try to make it a little easier. Are the same facts used in the first one or used in the second one? Is that was the result of the new charging?
there was a mix of both.
There was a mix of both?
On the untruthfulness issue, there was what was in the initial write-up, and upon issuing that write-up, Lieutenant Klein was advised by Officer Defina that one of the reasons why it was late was that he was working on it the whole time. And that is different from putting wrong dates on it. What was looked at is what he actually verbally told the lieutenant was one of the reasons for it being late is he was actually working on it, which means he was doing something with that. And that was looked into, and we very briefly touched upon that at the last hearing. We didn't go into a lot of in-depth discussion on that particular aspect of what was told the lieutenant. different from the dates.
Okay. That information was separate from the prior information that you had, that he was charged with? So this was new information that he came up and gave to Lieutenant Klein after the initial discipline?
My recollection is the discipline that he got on December 23rd, I think it was, had to do with that report and the dates specifically on that. And at that time, when the write-up was issued, it's my understanding statements were made that were felt not to be true. And that, in turn, was part of the IA as far as the truthfulness of what was told upon being issued that in reference to those circumstances.
All right, do you know when that was, time frame, when this came about afterwards? How much longer after the initial December 11th disciplinary action? There was a separate, if I'm understanding it correctly, there was a separate disciplinary action taken based on what he told Lieutenant Klein, or at least in part on what he told Lieutenant Klein afterwards?
No. That was part of the IA.
Okay, when did
That
the IA...
subsequently came.
Okay, when did the IA become active?
Beginning of January. I want to say January 8th or 9th, but if you give me a second, I'll give you the date.
Was it started in January of 2010?
No.
2009.
2009, excuse me.
It was the beginning of January. It was January 8th or 9th. The first memo from Lieutenant Klein was dated January 8th, 2009.
And that, let's see what we need to walk through. That memo was generated by Lieutenant Klein, was given to, we're trying to establish a timeline here, a chronological timeline that can make it easier for us to look at.
January 8th, 2009, Lieutenant Klein authored a memorandum and gave it to Captain Paul Cecilio.
All right. And that memo that he gave, do we have copies of that in the HPD evidence? Was that given to us? The evidence package that you asked us to read? Because I don't recall seeing it.
I don't believe so. I believe it's all part of the internal investigation.
Okay, the internal investigation, based on the internal investigation, charges were brought against the officer, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Was the officer given copies of the internal affairs investigation once the discipline was handed out?
No.
How come?
I believe part of the package of information that I provided to you at the request of Attorney Lefebvre after last meeting had a memo from Attorney Bailey as far as the procedure that we followed in those type of situations in the past. So it's not, bottom line is we do not automatically give somebody their internal copy of their internal investigation.
Even if they're being disciplined?
That's correct.
But you didn't give him a copy of the memo either?
No, the memo from the lieutenant would have been part of the internal investigation.
Okay, so he never saw the memo either.
Unless he saw it during the IA, if the investigators allowed him to read it or review it during the actual investigation. But as far as afterwards, no, the employee doesn't have a copy of the internal investigation, which would include any memos, whether they're internal or an external complaint that ultimately kicks off an IA.
Commissioner, if I may.
Just a moment, sorry. We've got some communication from the attorney on that specific question.
Yes.
And it appears, from what I can see, that there was supposed to be that the employee was supposed to be given the IA because it involved discipline. Do you have the same letter as I did?
The letter
Dated
from-
April 26, 2011?
My understanding of that is that the attorney has advised us in the past, and I believe he stated here, that that the employee does not have an entitlement to review the internal affairs files. However, she talks on the second page about in the first full paragraph, employee is not entitled to review an internal affairs material. However, it talks about RSA 516:36(2) and what's been done in the past as far as the union working with the department, because NEIA information may become part of the process. So the way I read this is that when we do an NIA, the employee does not automatically get a copy, and that the only time they get a copy is either through the union or through an attorney, if they have an attorney who is looking for specific information. And then, as Attorney Bailey talks about in here, there is work between the attorneys as far as confidentiality agreements and as such that she's written in here.
Yeah.
So only through the attorney or only through the union?
Right, unless that it's requested. If it is requested, again, the employee does not automatically finish an internal investigation on any issue and be given a copy of it. They, according to what she says in the second page of this, her advice to us had been, as she says, thus in general, police department employee is not entitled to review internal affairs investigations concerning the employee. However, it does talk about that some of it may be admissible in a disciplinary hearing down the road, basically, and that there's work between both sides to figure out what's going to be material to the hearing or the process, and then both sides work on having only that information that's needed come out of the file. But even at that point, unless it's the whole file, the employee is not just handed the internal investigation file.
Right. It's my understanding that the same advice was given, that there was an agreement signed, a confidentiality agreement signed by both parties involved, so that the employee could view those and get copies of them.
On that particular situation, you're talking about the specific suspension?
Yes. I'm talking about, let's see, this would have been going back to... This had to do with the discipline involving the employee. Second to last paragraph says that they initiated a grievance, and there was discipline issued against the employee, and it was based on internal affairs investigation material.
I believe the way I read it, she's saying that that's how the process works and has worked in the past, but not in the case we're talking about, that that's how it works.
All right. Do you know which agreement she's talking about? Because here she said specifically the Hooksett Police Department, through me as counsel, forwarded a letter which was forwarded to the union local, and the employee signed and committed to honor various conditions of confidentiality as a prerequisite to having access to confidential internal affairs investigation material as part of the disciplinary action on behalf of the employee through the grievance process. Was he afforded copies?
My understanding was she's explaining how the process has worked in the past. I understand that that process has worked in the past. It was dealt with between Attorney Bailey and the union's attorney, but in here, I don't believe this letter she's addressing the specific issues we're here tonight about. The way I read it, she's talking about how the process has in fact worked in the past.
this response that we got back from her is specific about signing an agreement between the employee and the police department. What is this letter referring to then, if it's not referring about
This case,
this case?
right?
My understanding was the way she wrote it was she was clarifying how the police department handled internal affairs files. That's all I can say based on reading her letter.
So this would be a generic employee that signed this, and it would be a generic.
I took this letter as a generic letter as far as how the process has worked in the past.
Okay. And I take it specifically. We have planned attorney. And we can get that. Okay, on the heels of that, if it's your understanding that this is just generality, this is just general opinion that she's giving, that this is how it should go? That's my understanding, Chief, of your understanding?
That's what I believed, yes, what I believed.
Based on that, was this followed in this particular case?
No, because at the step we're at, the union should have brought, I think I made note in your packet, under Article 25, the union should have brought the grievance forward, and I believe did not. So that this process never occurred in the situations we're dealing with now. I believe if you go to, in that packet of information, under Article 25, it talks about if the grievance of the or union is not satisfied with the disposition of the grievance by the commission, or if no decision has been rendered within 10 days, it says the union may submit in writing a request to American Arbitration Association.
That's step 4.
That's step 4,
Right.
right?
But we're in step 3.
Three.
Well, no, I believe that we're in step 4 because Officer Defina did submit grievances, 2 grievances to then Commissioner Gagnon.
Right.
So that meant that he had moved it from step 3 to step 4. And the way I'm understanding it, that by moving it to the commission, step 3 is if the person is not satisfied with the disposition of the grievance by the police chief, then the agreement with the union can move to the police commission. Step 4 is how, the way I read it, is
What
how-
happened in step 3? What happened in step 3?
In step 3, it was never heard by the
Right.
commission, was it?
Step 3 wouldn't be heard by the commission because that's
And where does the commission come into play?
How can you say it's a step to have if you say it's not, it wouldn't have been heard by
Step
them?
3 says it's filed with the commission. It doesn't say that they hear it. If you read step 3, it says the grievance together with the union may file the grievance with the police commission within 5 working days after said grievance was filed with the chief.
Right.
So I read step 3 that
What does it say
that's
after
the
that?
filing.
But after that sentence, what does the CBA say in step 3, right after that sentence? If the employee is not satisfied,
You're still in step 3 or step 4?
what you just read, Chief.
Right, step 3.
Okay. Read the rest of that, please.
Well, let me start from the beginning.
Okay.
If the grievance is not satisfied with the disposition of the grievance by the police chief,
Right.
or if no decision has been reached within 5 working days after filing with the police chief, the grievant together with the union may file the grievance with the police commission within 5 working days after said grievance was filed with the police chief.
Right.
And Officer Defina did do that. He delivered to then Commissioner Gagnon's mailbox the 2 grievances,
Right.
which then moves us to step 4.
No, you got to stop right there.
When did the police commission hear it?
The commission didn't hear it, the commission received it, right? If we do that school of thought, that your understanding, then the police commission would be bypassed, and it would go automatically if they wanted to non-binding arbitration. If that's the way you understand it. But I think if we look at the step 3, it went to you, it wasn't satisfied, or he didn't find it satisfactory, then he filed it with the commission, which was received by the commission. When we get into step 4, the first line says, excuse me, the first sentence, if the grievant or union is not satisfied with the disposition of the grievance by the commission, right?
Right.
Okay.
That means that in
So we
step
would have to
3,
come before
the
them.
commission would have either heard it or decided it.
Well, again, I understand what you're saying, and again, we're back to a discussion we had weeks ago about the fact that the grievance was turned into me by Commissioner Gagnon, was sent to Attorney Bailey, and Attorney Bailey and the attorney from the union then had whatever contact they had and discussions about how to deal with it. So I can't answer, I understand your line of reasoning.
Right.
I can't answer for what was happening.
But it was up to the commission at that point to have either heard it, rendered a decision, or moved on, instead of automatically taking it and shipping it off to an attorney.
I
There's a
can't,
responsibility.
I hear what
I'm
you're
just
saying.
telling you where I'm coming from when it comes to why we're sitting here, where we fall into the grievance step. It's a responsibility of the commission to do what they're supposed to do, whether they hear the case, render a decision, or move it forward into non-binding arbitration. But we're in step 3, because when the employee gave that and it was received by Commissioner Gagnon, he was within the time frame required in step 3. He filed it within the time limit. The commission failed to move forward.
I can't answer for what the commission did at
No, I'm
that
telling
point.
you, they failed to move forward because there was nothing heard. They didn't do what they were supposed to do back then. They submitted that, and what you're telling me is that it got sent off to the attorneys. And that's not what's the responsibility of the commission at that time. But having said that,
Can you tell me what the attorneys, or what Attorney Bailey said at that time? Do you have any recollection of that? Because I guess what I'm hearing is that basically it was turned over to the attorneys, and then it was naturally assumed that there was nothing that was going to happen with regard to the commission.
I can't say that. It was turned over to Attorney Bailey, and she, at that point, was having conversations with the union's attorney, and I have since this process started, I have talked to Attorney Bailey, and she said that her understanding was that any outstanding issues, grievances, whatever, were going to be resolved at the hearings we had in September. Obviously, these weren't resolved in September, but I can't tell you what discussions she had with the union's attorney about at the time how they would proceed with this when she received this, or if they made some agreement to proceed with it later.
But can you see by doing that, more or less, it means that the commission has defaulted because they didn't follow that step.
I understand what you're saying, but I can't answer for what the attorney did. If Attorney Bailey made some agreement with the union as far as putting this off for down the road, I don't know if that happened or didn't happen.
is there anything in the Hooksett Police Department files that would indicate that there was a written agreement between the union and the Hooksett Police Department through Attorney Bailey? Do you have any documentation of that that says we're agreeing to abandon, we're agreeing to move this on, we're agreeing to do nothing with it, or is there anything?
I don't. The attorneys would have to answer that question.
But I'm asking, is the Hooksett Police Department, do you have anything?
Do I have? No. I'm not privy to their conversations or to letters that they may have sent back and forth to each other while the other processes were going on.
But normally they would send you copies, right? Anything that you send off to the attorney, you would get a CC as to what's going on, I would assume.
I would assume, but I'm not. I would hope. But again, I can't.
In this instance, you're saying there is none.
I don't have. Right. I'm not aware of anything. Exactly. I understand exactly what you're saying, and I'm not aware of what occurred between the two attorneys.
Just going back a little bit, Chief, to what I was asking you about before, about this being basically the same incident from December 11th, even though he was disciplined on December 23rd with the 5-day suspension that at one point got reduced to 2.5 days. Do you not consider that double jeopardy? To be the same, the same incident?
If I understand, and I won't put words in Captain Daigle's mouth, if I understand, there was going to be a process that Lieutenant Klein was initiating, and that later on it was learned that some of the information given by Officer Defina to Lieutenant Klein was not true. So that while it seems to be based on the same fact pattern, that in fact it was another issue that occurred on the part of Officer Defina, and I believe that is what the captain was saying.
On this December 11th incident, what determined, or who determined that it was a hate crime?
You would have to ask either Captain Daigle from the IA or the other staff members that were here that dealt with that initial intake of that report.
Do you want him to come forward? Do you want him to come forward? Who's going to respond to that? Go ahead. Who was going to answer with regard to that? To Commissioner Corleon's question? Who was going to respond to that? Would you come forward? And I would ask who's ever going to answer to come forward and speak into the mic. Apparently it's causing some difficulty for the clerk to record. And if you are, would you please identify yourself?
I can tell you that when it came to me, everything in writing refers to it as having been a hate crime. I did not track that down further to figure out the determination on that. That's the way that was given to me. It was already termed that several times in the documentation that I have, and that's what I went with. So I can't answer for anybody else that's not speaking here today on how that came down in the beginning. I can tell you that when I got it, it was labeled as a hate crime in several different places, and that's what I went with. An official determination by somebody, I can't answer for that. When I got it, it was labeled as a hate crime in writing, and when it refers to in memorandum in different places, it refers to that as a hate crime.
All right, and who is the author of these memorandums? Do we know?
First one is Lieutenant Klein on January 8th, 2009.
Now that information is strictly in your IA, correct?
That's not information we have at all.
That's correct.
All right, so that's information that you have,
Correct.
and that's not information that the officer has, right?
Correct.
In that, does he indicate how he determined it would be a hate crime? Or did he articulate?
I do not believe so, no.
Lieutenant Klein, I'd like to call and ask down something.
Of course. Right there, sir.
Would you come to the mic, please, Lieutenant Klein?
I'm trying to prepare for the answer.
Okay, sure.
secondary memorandum, but that's also referenced in the beginning as well.
Who was that by?
That one was by Captain Paul Sicilian.
Is Captain Cecilio here this evening?
Yes, I am.
Thank you, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. It's not that you're invisible, I apologize. Come forward, yes. And would you identify yourself or the clerk?
Lieutenant Klein. I think that you'll find, and I don't have the RSA right in front of me on the top of my head to recite it to you, I'm trying to look it up. But as you look at the RSA, you will find that any crime committed based on someone's sexual orientation, based on someone's religion, their racial backgrounds, is considered a hate crime. That's very clearly defined. It's just I can't lay my finger on it right now. I'm just looking through the book. That's what was my delay in coming up here.
So how did it become determined that it was a hate crime? Because when between two different colored people, if you will, white and black, it has to be more than just skin color that would indicate it's a hate crime, right?
Okay. The profane language.
Is that
I don't prefer to say that.
Any different times that we use?
Yes.
Okay.
That was used in a descriptor the first time that we went there regarding the Facebook or the MySpace, whichever forum it was. I got to look at the report here to get back to it. But the one party called the other party a derogatory name and basically implied that they were going to take them out.
Was it racial?
Yes. There's no doubt in my mind, I've been doing this job for a long time, it was clearly a hate crime, yes, sir.
I'm not doubting, I'm just asking you, was a name, a racial
Yes, sir, it was.
slur used to call either the white person or the black person?
Yes, sir, it was.
Okay, and that's in a report somewhere?
Yes, sir.
Is that supported by anything other than the alleged victim? Is there somebody else that would corroborate that, a witness? Or
The
anything?
school principal, the assistant principal also saw the page, the website. The detectives that handled the follow-up on that case saw that also.
So it's a website?
It's either Facebook or MySpace, I'm not
So it was
positive.
a posting
Yes, sir.
before or after this altercation?
After the punch in the face, an additional.
Okay, so that occurred after the assault?
Yes, sir.
So it would have been after the fact. So at the time of the assault, it wasn't racial in any way? 'Cause
If
that
we,
was-
no, during the assault,
Yeah.
if we had known that the assault had taken place, we could have intervened as far as the two kids were concerned, prior to it raising to the level of being a hate crime. Okay, I don't know what the precursors were to the assault. I'd have to look back at the report, but it's so redacted I can't even make sense of it at this point. The bottom line, I'm sorry.
But at the time of the incident, at the time of the assault, there was a fight between two students, correct?
Yes, sir.
Two different colored students.
Yes, sir.
White student and black student, I assume? Okay. At that time, there was no racial epithets used, there was nothing, no name calling that would lead anybody to think it was anything other than a fight between two people that happened to have two different skin colors until there were some postings after the fight? Is that what my understanding is?
If I could just review this document.
While you're looking for that, that incident happened the same date as the texting issue?
No.
No.
Prior to.
Prior to the texting issue? When?
When was it?
After.
The texting issue was after?
The texting issue was before.
That's what I thought.
The assault and the texting were the same day.
That's what I thought.
A few
Thank
days
you.
later was the MySpace post.
Okay, that's what I needed to get square in my
I
mind.
didn't hear that. What was that?
I asked the question of whether or not the texting issue happened the same date. And it indeed did
It
happen.
wasn't a texting issue, it was a posting on a computer.
No, what I'm asking about is what you're speaking.
Oh, the other texting issue.
The other texting issue that happened on the same date, is that not correct?
Just as,
Okay.
Well, it happened after?
No, it happened before.
This fight took place after this texting?
no, it's my understanding the fight took place before the texting incident
So
came
the
in.
fight took place before it, but on the same day?
On the same day, yes, sir.
Can we go back and review a little bit of the sequence about the texting and the fight? Okay, they both happened the same day, and you're telling me, or I've just heard, that the fight happened earlier in the day,
It's my understanding, yes.
before the texting?
Yes.
Okay. And Officer Defina, I'll ask you to respond to this. Were you aware of the fight right away? Or what happened? Just, would you please explain to me how you became aware of the fight and then also the texting?
After the fact, when I was ordered to leave the school, that's when they told me about the fight.
After you left the school?
As I was leaving the school. I responded to the school for the texting incident. Unbeknownst to me at that time, the fight had occurred, the students had been disciplined and released to their parents. So there was no way I could have intervened because it had been taken care of by the school. And the school only told me about it when they saw that I was getting up to leave in the middle of dealing with the texting incident.
So
Captain Daigle, is that reflected in your internal investigation,
As far as what he just said.
what he just said? Is that either verified or not?
I believe he would have answered that way in the internal, yes.
Okay, so that, what he just told us would have been answered in the internal, the same sequence that he's talking about. That he left, or as he was leaving,
He was given a report from school, correct.
okay. Now, when, and this is Officer Defina again, when I was reading through the information that you handed us last time, and it was basically, you're going through the sequence of events, okay, that occurred.
Yes, ma'am.
It says that you called the department and you spoke to someone at the department,
Yes, ma'am.
and you spoke to them about what incident?
The only incident I was aware of at that time, the texting incident.
And who did you speak to at the department?
Detective Sergeant Bernardi.
Okay, and what did you speak to them about? Did you report the texting, or what happened?
Yes, ma'am. I never dealt with an incident of that type or that large, and
Okay.
I was trying to reach whoever I could to get some resources and some help, some advice.
And what is it that Detective Sergeant Bernardi, you said it was?
Yes, ma'am.
What did he say to you?
He said he was going to continue to try to get in touch with my supervisor, who was Lieutenant Klein. They were in oral boards at the time, so he couldn't come out. Detective Sergeant Bernardi had told me that he had heard of an incident in Salem, in the Salem School District that had just happened. That type of texting incident had been new around the country, and different states were handling it different ways. Some states were charging students and some weren't. And he had suggested I try to contact Salem, since they had just handled it and it was on the news, and try to find out from Salem School or Salem's SRO any advice on how to handle this incident, since we had none from the PD.
Did you do any of that?
Yes, ma'am. I spoke to, I believe it was the Dean of Education over in Salem. He had told me that he was going to call their SRO. He was off duty at the time, but he was going to call him and have him call my cell phone back, the SRO cell phone, so he could tell me exactly what they went through, and because I guess the SRO he was intimate in the details as far as how they dealt with it.
And what happened next? Did he call you back at all?
He did call me back. He was very helpful. Told me how the Salem School District, the Salem Police Department had handled the incident. Basically gave me step by step what their plan of attack was on how to handle this, a felony of this level spreading through the school like wildfire, like it had. So I shared my information back with Detective Sergeant Bernardi again after I'd spoken to him, and shared it with the principal at College Middle School so we could try to formulate a plan of attack, how to protect the students from the illicit material.
What did Detective Sergeant Bernardi say? Did he have any instructions or anything?
We'd been talking back and forth. I kind of was feeding him what I had. I tried to keep him in the loop as much as possible of what I was doing at the time, and he still was trying to get in touch with my supervisors to see if there was any resources. And I basically, it turned into the principal called a all hands on deck meeting with the school, and we started formulating from that point. He was on the phone with the Attorney General's office almost immediately. I believe that day he made contact with them, and we started setting up how we were going to deal with this. From what Salem had told us, expect the media the next day to be there. When this stuff hits, it hits, and interviewing parents and all that stuff. So it was how to protect the students, how to contain the incident, go from there.
Now, did the police department provide any resources? You said resources?
None. My police department, none. In fact,
What did they say?
when Detective Sergeant Bernardi called me back, it was, you gotta go. You gotta wrap it up and get out of there. They weren't gonna authorize any overtime. That was it. That's what I relayed to the school.
For the texting, they were not going to authorize any?
For the texting incident, yes.
Okay, so what did that mean to you?
I had to go. It means go. I'd already been told, as I stated earlier, that there was no overtime. No overtime for the SRO program. That's that.
Why no overtime for the SRO?
That's the word that came down. Well, as things were happening, as things were happening in the media, when I got pulled out of the schools and then put back into the schools, the way I functioned as in the school and my position changed drastically as far as what I was allowed to do. Before, it was my hours could shift and I could do things as needed, and it turned into no overtime whatsoever. So when I was told, Detective Sergeant Bernardi told me that was passed on from my supervisors, that wrap it up and get out. And come to find out, it was passed on, I believe, from after my conversations, that it came from Captain Cecilio through Lieutenant Klein to Detective Bernardi, Sergeant Bernardi, that told me to get out. And that was that.
But did that mean for that incident that you were made aware of just as you were leaving? Or did it mean for anything that you had to leave the building?
It meant get out now. I was dealing with a felony level offense. From the information we'd taken, multiple suspects, multiple victims, and I relayed that, and it turned into, you need to get out now. You need to go.
Did the school advise you, when they told you that there was a fight between these two students, did they tell you that there were racial epithets used?
Not at all.
Think anything that it's
At no time.
anything other than a fight between two students?
No, that was it. They told me who the students were, what had happened, and that was it.
Lieutenant Klein, I have a question for you, sir. On the personnel records entry form dated December 23rd, 2008, the fifth paragraph down, you state, or you wrote, I should say, I spoke to you today when you turned in this report, and you stated that had received that report from the school on December 11th, 2008. I asked you if you thought it may have been important to advise me of the incident that day, and you agreed it would have been the proper course of action. A student being physically assaulted in a cell phone incident involving explicit material involving a juvenile is equally important. It's my understanding that it wasn't for a couple of days later that this MySpace or wherever it was on the internet, the social media site, that where these racial tones were coming into play. right? That's what you were saying, it was a couple days later?
We did that report, yes, I believe so.
All right. Are you saying here that you're reprimanding him for not telling you about the fight in the school that day?
Yes.
Is the SRO supposed to tell you about every single altercation that occurs between students?
Every safe school report, there's a required to advise me of it. It's a current thing that the Sergeant Blanchett does right now.
Oh, okay, but on that day, on that particular, excuse me, on that particular day, you're saying that he should have filled out a safe school report and advised you of it?
He should have told me, notified me of the investigation that there was an assault that had taken place in the school, yes, sir.
All right, but were you aware that he didn't get it until he was leaving school? He wasn't advised of the fight until he was leaving?
No, even if he was leaving the school, he would have seen me before he left, so he should have had an opportunity to tell me about that fight, yes, sir.
So he should have said to you, oh, by the way,
Yes.
there was a fight between student A and student B in the school.
At least made me aware of it, yes, sir.
Based solely because it's a simple assault, or based because it was a racial?
Because it's a safe school report, sir. Anytime they take a safe school report, I'm notified, so that I can at least...
If a safe school report is not taken at the discretion of the officer, then he wouldn't have to follow that, right?
No, you've got an assault between two parties, a safe school report is required, so that's clearly defined in the memorandum of understanding between the school and the police department. And especially where it involves...
I thought there's some stuff in the memorandum that allows the school to handle it.
No, not when it involves a strike to the head.
I'm sorry?
There's a specific section in there that it says, it's very specifically, it involves a strike to the face or the head, then that is automatically a safe school report. It takes that authority away from them. A simple assault, someone pushes somebody, yes, they have the authority to deal with that. But under the memorandum of understanding, there's a couple of different sections to it, Commissioner, and there was one section that I specifically highlighted in the write-up was a strike to the head or anything involving religion or hate crime type of activity.
Right, but when did the department find out that it was a strike to the head? When did they find this out, that it was a possible hate crime?
After the report of the actual hate crime. I was told that it was actually, when I found out that the student was in school suspension, serving an in-school suspension for having assaulted the very same kid, that's when I found out. And that's when I found out that it was a strike to the head over time.
When was that in relation to the date of the incident?
The date, whenever the hate crime report was filed, very specifically. The hate crime report was filed.
Who filed that?
That was through the school.
Okay, when did they?
Jay called on that one.
And when did you file that?
The day it happened, I believe it was the 17th, that's a Wednesday.
Mhm.
So on the 17th, you notified them that it was a hate crime. You did it.
I never notified anyone it was a hate crime.
Okay.
To this day, I believe it wasn't a hate crime.
So how were you notified that it, who said it was a, what did you put in your safe school report? That it involved
I believe it was a threat. The MySpace, he was calling him out basically because he had told on him for the assault, and his MySpace was challenging him to a fight, and I believe he called him a snitch. He did use a racial word, but at no time do I believe that the incident between the two students was a hate crime. I never used the word hate crime. And if I may, I've got several voicemails where the lieutenant will call. I'm kicking out early today. If there's any reports, just put them on my bin. So this whole tell me everything that happens every single day before you leave, I just want to make that clear. That's not how it was.
That changed after some of the disciplines, that he was required to check with me every day. That was prior to some of the other disciplinary action that occurred. He was given a further memorandum that indicated you will check in with me every day at the beginning of your shift to let me know what you have outstanding for paperwork. That was clearly changed in the memorandum. Yes.
And this was
when that memorandum was?
I don't have a copy of it with me. It was a memorandum that was put out because there was some guidance that was put out from Captain Cecilio, and I further explained it because Officer Defina had come back to me and said, I don't understand this guidance that's been put out by Captain Cecilio, and this is counseling. So in order to try to explain that further, I made it very clear to him that he would check in with me on these things. because that's what the captain was pushing down to me.
Okay.
And the December 23rd discipline is the first discipline. So if it came out after the discipline started coming out, that was the first discipline.
Can I ask you what Captain Cecilio, not Captain Cecilio, Lieutenant Klein, and probably Captain Cecilio, do you, either one of you, accept any responsibility in the fact of you telling him to leave the building? And there's absolutely no overtime in finding out this information after the fact that there was indeed some serious incidents that happened over there. Did you feel responsible in the fact that you told him he had to leave?
I was ordered to have him leave, and that's the orders that I gave. When I'm given an order, I give that order, I push that order down. My understanding was things had been wrapped up at the school, and if Officer Defina is telling me it hadn't been, okay, then that's what that is. Well, I'm not going to accept responsibility for ordering him out of the school. The responsibility lies that I've been given a mandate, I've been given a order, I have to push that order down. If I don't, I'm failing to follow that order.
And I can certainly appreciate that, but can you understand the quandrum here? If you're saying, or at least what I'm understanding from the officer, that he was told that he absolutely had to leave the building, that there was no overtime for the school resource officer. And I guess I'm wondering, what does a person do? They do exactly what they've been told, that they have to leave the building, but then after the fact, you're told that, you didn't complete the report in a timely manner. And I guess what I said to you before, or just a minute ago, was it's kind of difficult for an employee. If you can't stay and complete the report, what does that mean for the supervisor? Did the supervisor indeed err in this situation, or should the supervisor, have had a subsequent conversation and say, and I guess that's, where my concern lies, if you would respond. And I can see that Captain Cecilio is coming forward and...
And just for clarification, the definition of a hate crime, it is in RSA under the extended terms as far as imprisonment, 651 semicolon 6, 651 semicolon 6, subparagraph F, was substantially motivated to commit the crime because of hostility towards the victim's religion, race, creed, sexual orientation as defined in RSA 21 semicolon 49, or national origin or sex. That's the section. I just want to make sure I had that for you.
You do, but it doesn't say that.
If I may, real quick, it still doesn't prove it was motivated because of the race. That was never the issue.
Chief, I have a question for you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Captain Cecilio that was going to finish.
Yeah, Commissioner, can you just restate your question so I can answer it correctly?
Well, I guess what I was asking Lieutenant Klein, whether or not he felt any responsibility given the fact that he insisted, and I guess you also insisted, that he leave the building and that there would be no overtime. And I think...
Well, Officer Defina
said that.
said that.
Okay,
He said he
no...
called looking for assistance, looking for help, and detectives would handle that degree of crime. We wouldn't expect the SRO to handle that degree of crime. That's why detectives would handle that case. It wasn't an ongoing case at that point. Interviews and everything else that had been conducted would have been conducted by them. As for the hate crime, they weren't aware of the assault which had taken place because it was never reported to anyone until after they were looking into the hate crime and detectives discovered it. They were never told of the incident where the assault with a juvenile was struck twice in the face, white student on black juvenile. We were not even, it was a white student on a black student. And we were not told, based on the racial repertoire that was inside the electronic media, that they were investigating at that point. That is when they learned that the juvenile was already in detention for the assault. Prior to that, they had no knowledge.
Now, did I hear that, is this thing working? Yes, I guess it is. Did I hear that Officer Defina said that he understood that the school was taking care of that? Is that what you said?
It's a mandated report.
They had already
But I
taken care of
guess
it.
when I read through, and this is where it has me a little bit mystified over the memorandum of understanding between the Hooksett School District and the Hooksett Police Department at the bottom of page 2. Simple assault may result in some injuries. Simple assault also include knowingly having unprivileged physical contact with another person, recognizing that this can be very minor contact. And then it says here that principals will consider the district's disciplinary policy when making a determination about whether or not to file a safe school zone offense report. And that, to me, basically says, and I know what Lieutenant Klein said earlier, but it kind of puts the ownership back into the school district of whether or not there is a report that's going to be filed. And I know what the lieutenant just said, but I guess knowing this, you know.
Commissioner, so
can you
you're
clarify
telling me that a blow to the face, one student on the other, is a minor incidental contact?
You talking about a punch or a blow with an instrument? What are you talking about when you say?
He was struck twice in the face, is my understanding.
Foot, hands?
Hand.
Was he open, closed?
I believe it was closed off my independent
He was
recollection.
punched in the face?
Okay. Yes.
All right. Okay.
I don't view that as an incidental contact.
Did the Hooksett Police Department investigate and come to the determination that this was not mutual combat?
They did do an investigation. The juvenile was charged.
Okay,
At some point.
Did they come to the determination that it was not mutual combat?
Yes. I believe, off the top of my head, the student was punched in the face because he knocked off his hat as he was getting on the school bus,
Well,
accidentally.
so one student knocks the other kid's hat off when they're getting on the bus accidentally,
Yeah,
and the other student that got his hat knocked off punched the student twice
in the face.
in the face, and based on what happened a couple days later in the social media site, it turned into a hate crime.
Based on what it said, the calling of a snitch, the use of the N-word on his site
Right.
was what was sparked an investigation into whether or not it was a hate crime.
Okay.
Do we have, or do you have, does the department have the report that was filed by the school district?
It should be in the documentation of the IA.
And what does the department of the school district, what did they write in the report?
I'd have to have asked Captain Daigle answer that.
I'd like to hear how they described it.
Are there any more questions for me, Commissioner?
No, presently. Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize.
I have one that has to do with the other grievance that I didn't have a chance to ask you at the last one. That had to do with the July incident. You know which one I'm talking about? The other discipline?
Correct.
Okay.
I believe that's the one with the Lieutenant Klein and Sergeant Dupuy, right, correct?
Right. Did you hand down that to be followed up by the officer? Did you advise?
I wasn't in the state when all that began.
Okay, so you had no involvement in that?
So I was on vacation. I was out of state. I didn't come back to July 12th.
But if I read the documentation, did you have a conversation about that before you left for vacation?
About what they were going on, that happened while I was on vacation.
I know you said it happened while you were gone, but I think, was it vacation or I'm thinking about the training that you went to?
I was on vacation from June 26th to July 12th. The incident took place.
Okay, but did someone approach you about what they were thinking of doing? And you had a conversation about what he was contemplating originally?
As for the discipline,
Right.
yeah, when I returned from vacation was when I learned of what was going on, and then they were going to speak with Officer Defina. And I advised them I didn't think they should have waited. They should have just went before I got back. Is that what you're asking me?
Yes, but did you, before you left on vacation or training, I don't recall which it was it vacation that you were on or training?
I believe I was on vacation when this happened.
Okay. Before you left, were you aware of the incident?
No.
So you didn't have any conversation about it or anything else?
Not on this incident that I can recall. There was one prior, but that's not up for today.
I'm sorry?
There was another discipline prior to, which had to do with drugs in the school, but that's not.
Okay, that's.
That's the fake drug one.
That's
Yeah. Correct, fake drug.
I think that's the one we're talking about.
Right, the fake drugs.
The one that had to do with, that fake drug.
The fake drugs happened, Commissioner, 7/13, correct?
Well, the employee was notified at 7/13.
It happened
Happened 7/3.
Right.
As I said, I was on vacation from June 26th to July 12th. So 7/3, I would have been out of state.
All right, but,
And no, I didn't have any conversation with anybody while I was out of state.
all right, this was, we got a memorandum that this happened somewhere in June, or in and around June 18th of 09. Is when reports were kicked back to Office of Defina for follow-up.
Could I review the document, Commissioner?
Yes, there's a memorandum right there. It's from the sergeant. It's memorandum right there. I think it was pretty fast. Remember that incident? Did you kick those down to Sergeant, or Lieutenant Klein and Sergeant Dupley to be followed up?
They would come to me after. The initial.
I guess what I'm looking for is who decided, who wanted this followed up on? Did it come down from you, come down from the chief, did it come down to you, down to the lieutenant, to the sergeant?
It would come from the detective division who the supervisor was signing off on the report. If it was June 18th, would put me, and that's why the commissioner was asking about school, June 15th to June 26th out of the school, so somebody else must have reviewed that report.
But Sergeant Dupree said that you were the one that asked for the follow-up. Is that correct?
We would follow up on a case with possible drugs in the school, of course we would.
Here's a question, Chief, with regard to this particular one. And it's basically your opinion. The last time we met, I think you made a statement that based on your training and based on the practice that you observe at the police department, that you said that it's your feeling that the officers need to document, and as well as the officers, the supervisors need to document everything. That's the training that you have. And you said that that's the way you feel it not only should operate, but that's the way it operates in the police department. Is that correct?
Yes, however, there is, when you read the discipline policy, the supervisors do have some discretion depending on the level of the issue for incident, and maybe if it's a first-time issue, they may not. So they do have some level of discretion. It's not an automatic.
So what you're saying basically is that you do allow the officers to have a certain amount of discretion with regard to whether or not it warrants a written or a verbal reprimand.
The supervisors or the OICs have a certain level of discretion. If it's a minor situation or it's something that has occurred just for the first time.
So after the fact, something that you might have heard, you wouldn't ask somebody to go back and write a reprimand after the fact, that if they hadn't written it, so be it. There was nothing that was going to follow after that. If they hadn't written it, that was it.
No, it is possible that as a situation makes its way through the chain of command, that any next level of chain of command may have knowledge that this officer had done something before that supervisor or OIC that night wasn't aware of, and could change, if you will, the approach that's going to be taken. For example, an officer works as an officer in charge on the evening shift tonight and runs into an issue with a patrol officer. It seems to be fairly minor, and the officer in charge tells the officer, just verbally talks to him or her and says, this is how you should do it. However, it's learned through the chain of command later on that this is the fourth or fifth time maybe this officer has done the same thing. The officer in charge didn't know that at the time, and now the situation would be looked at through a different set of eyes, if you will, with better knowledge of what happened. So there is the discretion, but there also is the chance to go back and review based on, in case some other party in the chain of command may have knowledge that another party did not.
What about a senior officer, somebody that is of a higher rank? Supposing someone of a higher rank that the individual was supposed to report to, that individual said nothing about the reports, but then after the fact, someone decides that they're going to put something in. You know, what does that do?
It's really the same idea, honestly, because the next level in the chain reviews what has happened at the lower level and makes a determination that based on other factors or that maybe known to that person or the circumstances, they have the right to feel that that situation was not handled correctly, either by SOPs or by, for whatever reason, at that level.
So what you're saying basically is that a detective or a sergeant can basically not overrule, but come back after the fact and say they do have issue with reports, even if, say, the lieutenant or the captain had no problem with the report.
It's possible, yes, because people have different levels of training.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
So if somebody that doesn't have a certain level of training doesn't do the same thing as somebody that has a higher level of training, they're still held liable?
Not if it's obvious that that's the reason. If I believe in one of these situations, Sergeant Dupree went back to Officer Defina and was explaining to him, or trying to explain to him, maybe a different level of understanding that the sergeant had, and that led to, I believe, words that between the two of them that was discussed at our last hearing. But generally, no. I mean, that's back to your initial part of your question. If an officer that's been out of the academy in 2 months has an issue tonight They obviously are going to be looked at differently than an officer that's been on the road for 5 years and does the exact same thing.
In December, on December 16th of '08, in Lieutenant Klein's, and the evidence that you gave us here for this personnel records entry form, the second paragraph states, on the evening of December 16th, '08, you attended the police commission meeting. Right? Is that something normal? Would Officer Defina normally attend the police commission meeting? Or was he called specifically to requested to be there?
I'm not sure, Commissioner, what you're reading, and I don't remember.
Okay. This is the evidence that you gave us? Some of the evidence.
Which number was that?
I turned that in, I don't believe they have that.
I'm sorry?
That was what I turned in earlier at the hearing. I don't believe they have a copy of the December 23rd write-up.
Oh, I stand corrected. That's correct. You're the one that brought this up. That's correct.
I was ordered to be at that commission.
In that December 23rd, the reason I bring this up is in this December 23rd records entry form, a discipline form here, it says that the officer, this is being written, I believe, by Lieutenant Klein. Who's number 19? Is that you, Captain?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. It indicates, it says that he attended, the officer attended a police commission meeting. And he was specifically asked by you if there were any reports that the police department was unaware of. Does he normally go to those meetings, or was he called specifically to attend this meeting? And that would have been the December 16th meeting.
Commissioner, as Officer Defina has already told you, I don't know what you're reading, and I haven't reviewed it, so can I take a look at it?
Oh, absolutely.
This is something that was generated by the department, whether or not it came from Officer Defina, or whether or not it still was generated by the department.
Right.
I'm sure it was. I'm not questioning that. I just want to refresh my memory.
Well, I'll make it easy. I'll read it. And paragraph 2, not that you can't, but we'll try to save some time here. On the evening of December 16, 2008, you attended the police commission meeting. You were specifically asked by Chief Agrafiotis if there were any reports that the police department was unaware of. He then clarified after your request for clarification on his question. He asked you if you had taken, quote, the safe school reports for all of the incidents that occurred at the schools, and you stated you had. This is when you knew a report had not been completed from the assault incident on 12/11/08. My question is, was he called to this meeting specifically, or does he routinely attend these police commission meetings?
My best recollection is he was called to that meeting. I believe it's possible that a prior SRO was called to that meeting also. I believe that former Commissioner Gagnon and had questions as far as what was happening in the schools. And remember, there were issues floating around about what was actually happening in the schools, and so I believe the SRO and the former SRO were ordered to that, if I'm thinking the same day, were ordered to that meeting to be able to articulate directly to the commission what is or what was or was not happening in the schools as far as the knowledge of the police department had.
When you say former SRO, who are you speaking of? You
I
speaking
think that was
about?
also in the Warhol.
Oh, okay, so, thank you. Sorry.
I take it the department and the commission on that evening was aware that perhaps there was some incidences that hadn't been reported?
I don't know.
Well, I'm curious as to why he would be called and why would they ask him specifically if there were any reports that the department was unaware of. I mean, that's pretty poignant. That's right to the point, which leads me to think that they may have had information, or the department had information, and now is calling him to a meeting and asking him, is this happening?
I can't say that I had information. I know that I believe the police commission wanted to hear from the SROs. There was a question of what was happening in the schools that we were aware of as a police department. Were the schools reporting everything to us? Because that's always possible that the principals use some discretion and something doesn't get reported to us. But as far as any potential background of why the question was asked, I can't answer that.
So you don't know why the officer and the former SRO officer were called to the meeting?
They were called to the meeting to answer any questions about how the SRO program was working within the schools. That was
So
a
that was
general
just
subject.
that was just a general discussion about it. It didn't pertain to any of this specifically.
My understanding from ordering them was just to have the SROs there for any questions that the commission may have had in general about the program.
All right, and I understand that, but this is very specific.
Right.
He was questioned specifically about any reports that weren't taken, that the department wasn't made aware of. Mrs. Defina, what was your purpose? Why were you called to that meeting?
I was ordered to the meeting to answer if there were reports, from my understanding, if there were reports out there that hadn't been reported.
Okay, so it was very specific.
There was an article in the paper which brought into question whether things were actually happening in the schools or not.
So
They were aware of that, very aware of that. It was a very hot topic in the media.
Okay, thank you.
And they did have information regarding both sides. There were memos that were generated. They know well aware of that. And the question that's on that form, where it says that I was asked directly a question from the chief, that was one of the hearings we had prior, and that question was not true. In the official commission minutes, if you read them, which is why they gave me half my time back, I was never asked that question. I made that very clear, yet they still put it in writing and said that I was asked that specific question by the chief, and that question was never asked.
Lieutenant Klein, you authored this. Can you tell me where this comes from, sir?
I wrote it,
Where you got that information? To include in your disciplinary report?
I authored that report without reviewing it, because I don't have the access to it right now. I don't have it with me. I'd like to take a look at it if I could. Okay, sir. The question is?
The question is you authored the report. Were you at that meeting?
Yes, I was.
Okay. Is it true that he was not asked at that meeting by the chief if there were any reports that the department was unaware of? Because what he's saying right now conflicts what's being said, written here.
My recollection of when I wrote this down at the time was that the chief had asked him. If he's saying that it didn't get asked, that wasn't my recollection of the meeting. So, we constantly go back to this, he said, I said, and that's not what I recall, otherwise it would not have been in writing.
Did anybody have the minutes to go back to refer to? And what did the minutes say? The minutes of the meeting?
Ma'am,
They do take
in
a
all fairness, the minutes, I'm not so sure the minutes contain every little fact or comment that's made, to be honest with you.
That's true.
That's been shown here in these numerous proceedings.
That's true. However, there was a tape.
Wait a minute. In these proceedings?
No, in commission meetings, it's been shown that not everything had been put in prior to here.
But there was a tape running, was there not?
I believe so, usually there is.
And were you able to go back to the tape?
I didn't need to go back to the tape, but my recollection is what I wrote down at the time.
But wouldn't you go back to the tape to verify, to make sure?
I don't need to. If my recollection is that it took place, then it took place. I can't answer to why the minutes are written the way they're written. I'm telling you, if I wrote this down, I wrote it because it was my recollection of the events that evening.
But if you went back to hear the tape, wouldn't you have been able to resolve the situation about what Officer Defina was saying, whether or not those questions were asked or they weren't asked, and that would have ended the conversation right then and there?
I don't recall that ever even coming up when we had this discussion, to be honest with you. I don't recall that ever coming up at the time that I had this discussion with him. If he has notes to the contrary, it's being news to me.
Chief, if I understand correctly, there was press out there about safe school reports.
Yes.
There was controversy about it.
Yes.
And the officer was called in, or was ordered in, and asked very specifically.
Right, I believe it was Commissioner Gagnon was the chair at the time, and I believe that the commission wanted to hear firsthand from the SROs what was or was not happening to the department's knowledge in the school. So it was to be asked general questions.
Okay, did the department already have that information and conveyed that to the police commission, or was this something new that was coming up that the police commission was getting? Because it sounds to me that they were right to the point, they went straight to it, they asked a very strict question about it, about reports, are they being reported, everything being reported?
I believe that my best recollection is that may have come from the letter that was in the banner that talked about what was happening or allegedly happening in the schools, and my staff and even Officer Defina are saying that they were not aware of that level of activity.
Yes, go ahead. Do you have anything to add to that, Officer Defina?
Yes, I do, ma'am.
Please respond.
As far as the first question, as far as the conversation between Lieutenant Klein and myself, we had a very lengthy conversation.
What are you talking about?
We're talking about what the question that he wrote on the December 23rd packet that you have, as far as the direct question that was asked of the chief to myself, what he wrote down. We had a very lengthy conversation about that when I was issued that. And I told him, if you don't remember that specifically, don't sign your name to that, because that's not what was said. I've made that very clear. I told him what was said, and 5 times in that conversation, he told me he was going to review those tapes. He promised me he was going to ask them, and I said there was some issues with tapes lately. Those tapes were destroyed within a week. Destroyed.
What was destroyed?
The tapes of that commission meeting were destroyed. A month prior, we had understood from...
Are those tapes missing? Chief?
The prior policy that we had understood through LGC was that tapes would be used just like personal notes when the person taking the minutes would take the minutes. That once the minutes were approved, the personal notes and the recordings could be destroyed or taped over or whatever.
Okay. What I want to do is, I want to narrow this down, okay, without going through this whole thing. On the 23rd of December, he was charged, one of the charges was for truthfulness, right? And the reason I'm asking this is I want to clarify if the same set of facts was used that charged him with the truthfulness, was that used in the later discipline? That's pretty much the crux of this right now, right? Right. We're going into...
Right.
I'm not asking any questions. I need clarification, I want clarification. He was written up for truthfulness back on December 23rd, right, 2008. Okay. The next charge was in July, right? And that had to do with the drugs, the fake drugs. Is that correct?
Chief?
I believe so. That's the one that's titled Daytime Event, July 3rd, 2009.
Okay. You made a statement, officer, at the last meeting that you felt there was double jeopardy.
Yes, sir.
Would you explain yourself, please?
If you look at the December 23rd, 2008 discipline form that I gave you, if you read the back of it, the second page says at the top about me passing the report, the safe school report, the assault, and then underneath it lists the series of different charges that they found me. Attached to that,
Now, which paragraph? On page 2.
I believe it's on page 2. I can't see the paragraph from here. It says you failed to submit a report in a timely fashion, something like that, and then it says you violated SOP 102. And then
wanted to report this assault in a timely manner.
yes, attached to that write-up is the exact same report that is given to me on July 13th. And if you look, they're the same disciplines.
Okay, where is that? That's in that package that you submitted?
Yes.
Right here.
No. You're going to have to show me that,
May I approach?
please.
Number 13th, isn't that the September 13th?
Right.
Yep.
Neglected reports all the time now. Goes to list of violations.
That's the assault back.
Submitting reports,
Where are you charged with that for the same incident?
This here. And if you look at the,
But isn't this one the big drugs?
no, this is the, oh, that is the picture, here's the other one. Yes. This is, yes, the July 15th, written as mail and mail train, so.
Okay. Chief, you want to approach, please? I just want you involved.
It's July 15th.
All right. Here's the December 23rd, 2008. Collect to report this assault in a timely manner, and then they list the charges of that. 16, submitting report, 17, truthfulness, 14, neglect to do. It's the exact same incident. This is the exact same fight report. So I submitted this on the 19th. It was reviewed by my supervisors, and 4 days later I was given suspension for 5 days. Then they take that report.
And they do an
You can see
internal.
the same exact report that's attached to it. And if you look, the results is that I violated 16 submitting reports, 17 truthfulness. They throw in an incompetence on this one and a conduct unbecoming on this one.
And what is this about, Chief? Why was he disciplined?
Because he said it was his fault. He became aware of the IA.
Comments that they're talking about me making when I handed the report in on the 19th that I was working on it, they had that information at the time I submitted the report. They had that information and the report itself. They took 4 days to review it and then gave me a 5-day suspension. Then they went and they reviewed the information again, and 7 months later give me another more discipline based on the same incident, which information they had at the time I submitted it.
I would just say that as Captain Daigle already testified, that while it is the same situation, that different fact pattern had come out as far as the officer's behavior.
Okay, and why wasn't I-8 instituted for the same situation?
Incident.
That's what I need to
We
clarify.
have to go back to the original, to the memos that we talked about earlier, or in the beginning of that IA, that were received by me. Talked about here, and they dropped a memo from Captain Daigle to myself, and a memorandum from Prosecutor Chilogibo to Captain Paul Sicilio. So those kicked off.
What I don't understand the December one is they list all of these charges against me, yet they're vague, and they just go and say, because I neglected to report the assault in a timely manner, the following all apply. How am I supposed to know what?
And they reduced that one down to what,
Well,
2.5 days, is that the one?
I have the police commission minutes from that meeting, and when I brought those forward, the commission decided to pull them back because that's not what was actually stated in here. The official minutes that the commission had, although the tapes were destroyed, they had unofficial and official minutes, which is exactly what I told them was said, not what was said in here. And if you look, which I brought up at the thing, both Lieutenant Klein and Chief Agrafiotis both signed this, saying that this is what was said. And the minutes that the commission had said it was completely different. That wasn't what was said.
Did they ever correct the minutes?
Not to my knowledge. I've got a copy of them.
And who took those minutes?
I believe Francine was doing the minutes at the time.
And I can only respond back to what the captain already said as far as, well, the basic fact pattern may have been the same. We felt that new behaviors on the part of Officer Defina had occurred.
New outside that incident?
No, within that incident, I believe.
So you were...
Again, we have to go back to the details in the IA.
All right, let me ask you guys. Thanks. Try to straighten this out. Captain, I've got, there was an inter-office memo that was sent to the chief dated June 8, 2009.
Okay, according to this personnel records form, entry form. What I'm trying to determine, and bear with me because it can be confusing if you don't have all the facts or you don't know all the facts, meaning me, not you. What changed or what additional information did you have that brought these new charges for the same incident back in December? There had to have been some new information that was received and found out in the IA, right? Internal. Is there new information, or did the department charge him and then realize that there could have been more charges brought forth at that time, but they didn't?
No, I think I can maybe clarify this for you.
I wish somebody would.
The part that refers to the untruthfulness,
On the first one.
no, the second one,
Okay, the second one, which is this one.
that was found in the IA, that untruthfulness issue, we were asking, does it arise from the same incident? The answer is this.
The facts of the untruthfulness. In other words, he was charged with untruthfulness here by either doing something or saying something, and then it was found out that what he was doing was not truthful. Those, what you found out afterwards, is it the same stuff, or is it new information of different things that were said, of different actions that were taken by the officer?
I would say to you it was new information, given this fact, and I think if I may be allowed to lay it out for you this way. The memorandum I have from Lieutenant Klein, and speaking with Lieutenant Klein, the untruthfulness issue does not surround the fact itself of the dates being incorrect. It surrounds the fact that when he was given that write-up on December 23rd, as Officer Defina had testified to, there was some lengthy discussion about whether there was reference to, hey, that question was never asked by the chief directly in that manner. So he would testify to, there was it wasn't just, here's the write-up, sign it. There was a lengthy discussion. In that discussion, when he was issued that write-up, there were comments made by Officer Defina about why that report was late. And the comments, correct, and the comments were that he had been working on that report during that whole time. And that was one of the reasons why it was late. When I get the memo and started this, the untruthfulness issue from Lieutenant Klein.
What memo?
Lieutenant Klein. The untruthfulness issue surrounds that fact.
Do we have that memo?
I don't believe you do.
Okay, that memo
I have it
is
here.
in IA.
Correct.
Okay.
It surrounds that fact, not, so when I say yes, it has to do with the same thing, and no, it doesn't. When he was issued the write-up on December 23rd, the fact of him, he didn't say that to the lieutenant at that time. When he got the write-up on December 23rd, during the discussions, the lengthy discussions that ensued, he told the lieutenant that the reason why that report was late was that he'd been working on it the whole time. The lieutenant felt that based upon what he had seen, the discrepancies in the report, that he had been lied to on the 23rd when he issued that write-up to him. That when he said that I had been working on that report the whole time was in fact not true. But that was a lie.
Okay, so he generated a report to you?
That's part of the memo that he generated, is saying that he felt that he lied to him by indicating that he had been working on this report.
All right, when did he generate or date that memo to you?
January 8, 2009. It's not to me, it was to Captain Cecilio from Lieutenant Klein.
So it was a
And
couple
in that
of weeks
memo,
later?
January 8.
Lieutenant Klein, why did you wait 2 weeks if you felt that time that he was lying to you? Why didn't you include that in your report here, in your discipline report at the instance? Or why didn't you report that he was lying to you until 2 weeks later? And I apologize, Captain.
That's fine.
You don't have the benefit of having the memorandum, but if I could just read the bottom paragraph of the memorandum so you hear what my thought process was and that got put into this.
At the time?
After careful review of all the documents surrounding this incident, it is my opinion that Sorel Defina lied to me by indicating he had been working on this report, case number 365784, since receiving the notification on 12/11. There are too many date discrepancies in this report which would lead me to believe that Sorel Defina was attempting to cover the fact that he had not done the report as he had stated, and he had been working on it at the time.
Okay, so you didn't have that information on the 23rd? You didn't believe that on the 23rd? He was lying to you until later?
No, I heard that on the 23rd. I want to be very careful that I didn't, there's a reason why I specifically cited the personal records entry form. I didn't want to cloud the two of them. This was more severe to me, when I issued this. It was after the fact that I'd issued that, and that's why I put in this memorandum. I didn't want to cloud the fact that there was any type of, I was cognizant of the fact that there would be on face value the appearance that he was being disciplined for the same thing. That's not the case here. What the process, what?
It's the same incident, it's the same incident, but not the same thing.
Not exactly. Basically, what it was is after my conversation with him, which was lengthy, I came to this conclusion. I took some time to think about this. I didn't just jump on it to issue the paperwork.
I'm not questioning that.
Yes, sir.
What I'm questioning is why it took, if you knew on the 23rd, and you were issuing him this on the 23rd, if you felt that he was lying to you or being untruthful to you above and beyond what you had already documented, why didn't you take care of it then, as opposed to waiting 2 weeks to generate a memo to the captain about something that happened 2 weeks prior that you were aware of the day you were issuing up the...
I was, may I start?
Yeah.
Because I felt that this rose to a level, but I had to take some time to think about this, and the information had been provided to me. I'd already issued the discipline. So in taking that time that it took for me to write the memo on January 8th, I believe it is, I took some time to think about this, and I decided at that point that there was a different situation that had occurred as a result of that meeting. And that's why I penned this memorandum to identify that issue. I didn't want to deal with it right then and there. I was dealing with the other reporting piece to it, the changing of the dates and those things. This was something that was above and beyond, in my opinion, that needed to be reported up.